Well, good morning, everybody. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's truly an honor for me to be here today. I've got some good news and bad news. Good news is we're already ahead of schedule. And the bad news is I have till 9:30, so the extra time, you're going to have to listen to me. The other bad news is I only have 15 minutes of prepared remarks, and I have to now stretch that to at least a good 35, so there'll be a lot more sea stories than perhaps you're accustomed to. We'll see if we can keep your attention as we go. Well, it's a great day. Great day to pause, sort of come to all stop, take a look at where we've been, get a fix as to where we are, and then sort of DR out ahead, make sure that we're heading in the right direction, and that we're on a good course for our Navy, a good course for our great country. And so that's pretty much my three-part sermon for today. I'm going to do a little bit of ONR past, a little bit of ONR present, and a little bit of ONR future as we talk about the challenges ahead. And I haven't gotten on the script yet, so I was about to say I'm about to go off script. But, I can't help but, wake up this morning and wonder, how crazy these times are. We certainly do live in interesting times. Who would have thought? Great Britain, European Union, mass exodus. What does this mean? Is it good? Is it not good? What is the trend that we're on as we look to the future? I think that as things begin to disintegrate, as things begin to splinter, I typically think those are warning signs of storm clouds brewing ahead. So before we get into the S&T and the innovation and the accolades of all of what you do, the great accomplishments of this storied institution, I just want to start off, before I say anything else, before I get into the boring speech, just to thank you and to tell you what you do truly matters. And, it's hard. We all spend this time, this sliver of time that we're given in our lives to make a difference. And you work hard at it. You keep plowing into the line, trying to see if you can get it to budge. Fighting those financial weenies. Was that the term? Those who try to take our money. And you get to the end of a long week or a tough month or a hard year, and you wonder, did it really matter? Did it make a difference? And thinking about the UK this morning, one of my favorite quotes is from Winston Churchill, sort of in the height of World War II. He said, what is the use of living if it be not to valiantly strive for noble causes, to make this world a better place for those who will live in it after we are gone? And I think as we look at 70 years, a couple generations, maybe three, you could fit into a 70-year period. And as we look to 140 mark, hopefully I'm not here as an invited speaker. But, it's all about trying to make this world, this muddled world, a better place. I completely blew a quote. Don't Google it while we're talking. It's Churchill calls it a muddled world that we're making better for those who live in it after we are gone. And that's what you do. That's what this is all about. It's about cool technology, and it's about breakthroughs and game-changing kinds of things. But in the end, it's really about making this world a better place. Talked about Brexit, and I think what we're all after is sort of the high values that we believe in, sort of these beacon of hope kind of things that America stands for. And that really is liberty. It truly is justice. Particularly for those that are oppressed, that don't have a voice, that need girding up, that need overwatch, that need protection. And that's what we're about. That's what America brings, is strength with purpose, to go ahead and stay the hand of the tyrant, of the oppressor, of those who misuse their power, of those who try to change stable international norms and standards for vile purposes at the expense of others that can't defend themselves. And so with that, that's the big takeaway. If there's, I'm going to say some other things about how great you're doing helping the fleet, but if there's only one thing you take away from this great day, it's what you're doing makes a difference. Now I'm into my prepared remarks. You know, I've had a long friendship and relationship with ONR. You know, prior to heading down to Fleet Forces in Norfolk, I was the N9I, the warfare integrator, you know, for capabilities and our investment strategy as a Navy. And so I regularly had the opportunity to look at a lot of the work that you were doing and to try to prioritize where the next nickel goes and the best bang for the buck that we can get for a fleet. And so it's exciting to be here to celebrate this technological advantage that you give to the warfighter over the past 70 years. 70 years is a long time. To help put it in perspective, consider in 1946, the average cost of a house, $5,600. Gallon of gasoline, 15 cents a gallon. The Cold War was beginning, and since that time, ONR has been ensuring the technical superiority of our Navy and Marine Corps forces, spearheading the research we need to help us maintain that advantage. So many of us are familiar with some of the big major ONR projects, the high-vis ones, radar, GPS, the railgun, but many ONR works are not as easily recognized. The truth is that ONR is involved in nearly every aspect of the S&T development within our Navy systems. Certainly radar and GPS have reshaped the fleet and how we operate on the seas. But rather than focus on the obvious, I'd like to highlight a more obscure project that's near and dear to my heart. So ONR PAST. This is sort of post-World War II. You know, talk about peace dividend, Cold War peace dividend, and we talked about the post-World War II peace dividend was rather tremendous. And we started decommissioning ships like no get out, and particularly submarines. You know, at the end of World War II, we looked at sort of the nefarious evil business of sinking ships from a covert posture under the seas, and it was very ungentlemanly, and but was something that we had to do to win the war in the Pacific. Well, after World War II, we sort of thought, well, we'll never need to do that again. So why do we need submarines? Well, you know, we looked out, you know, at our allies and potential future adversaries, and we began to see a disturbing trend, and that was not Germany, but Russia, former Soviet Union, was really pushing the pedal on developing a pretty robust undersea force. And at that time, it was no mystery. You know, he who rules the seas sort of writes the rules and runs the globe. And we weren't ready to concede this hard-fought advantage that we had both in the Atlantic and the Pacific post-World War II. So the true existential threat was, you know, what's going to go on in the undersea? This very unique asymmetric domain that sort of rewrites the rules of how sea power is fought. And so there was a challenge placed on our country. What are we going to do about this undersea threat posed by the former Soviet Union? You know, there was a space race for sure. You know, Sputnik sort of, you know, was alarming, and off into the races we went there. But there was this other subtle, covert, harder to see, opaque race in the undersea. And so one of the great, you know, early projects of ONR at that time was SOSUS. You know, this infamous, you know, critical Cold War technology, deep water, long-range submarine detection capability. We had to figure that out, and ONR was right at the head of that. You know, there were a group of scientists up at MIT, Lincoln Labs, over near Hanscom Air Force Base, west of Boston. My Bostonian. I was gonna start with a Red Sox joke, but maybe I'll save it for the middle when I start to see y'all nodding off. West of Boston, Lexington, Massachusetts, there's a restaurant there called Hartwell Farms Restaurant. It's a pretty good place. They have a nice breakfast menu. Well, it ends up a bunch of these MIT scientists, as they were starting to push around this challenge of trying to see through the undersea, long distances, you know, advanced notice as you know, these undetected assets come and threaten our shores. And so over, you know, napkins on the table, they began to draw out this idea, this array of sensors on the seabed with the right transducers that can stare out. And that project was called Project Hartwell, named after the Hartwell Farms restaurant in Lexington, Massachusetts. And one of the first big contracts of ONR at that time, this new kind of passive sonar. Well, the second project in ONR Pass that I want to talk about is also near and dear to my heart, and that was soon after we were up and running on deploying these seabed arrays. Well, we needed a system to be able to go ahead and monitor them, take a peek at them, see how things are looking. And so the next great technology was a submarine called Alvin. And many of you have heard of Alvin, this deep submersible, manned, and can also operate unmanned. This was back in the early 60s. But many of you probably didn't know that Alvin owes its existence to an unlikely source, the General Mills Cereal Company. So in 1960, ONR petitioned Woods Hole Oceanographic Research Institute to request bids to build a small submersible. General Mills won the bid. You know, it wasn't just about Special K back then. You know, they actually had an aeronautical research center. Can you imagine? This was just a different time in our country's history. And so with a big contract, 1960, $462,500, ONR went ahead and brought in General Mills with Woods Hole to build Alvin, a 6,000-foot deep diving submarine. So Alvin began research operations for ONR in 1965 by inspecting the Navy Underwater Listening Array, or SOSUS array, at the tongue of the ocean, Toto, in the Grand Bahamas. And, you know, as the submariners operated there quite a bit at AUTEC, I can only imagine how exciting that must have been to go ahead and get this deep submersible down into a mile below, you know, the surface there, inspecting that array. Yeah, as I was doing research on Alvin, there was a pretty cool story. It has absolutely nothing to do with the day, but it's interesting, so I'll share it. So on dive 202, which I believe was in the Mediterranean off of Spain, Alvin went down and was attacked by a swordfish. Can you imagine that? This angered swordfish, pretty deep, came up and starts beating up on Alvin and gets stuck in Alvin. To the point where they had to abort the mission, abort the dive, come up to the surface, pry off the swordfish, you know, off the side of the deep submersible. And as the story goes, they had a great dinner that evening. So, you know, Alvin is pretty infamous, but not so much infamous for SOSUS and necessarily picking things up off the bottom of the ocean, but there's another famous Alvin part. That involves an oceanographer named Lieutenant Bob Ballard, the driving force behind deep sea submersibles. He discovered ocean vents, deep ocean vents, aboard the sea submersible Alvin. And while that is significant, Lieutenant Ballard and Alvin, what made them infamous was Lieutenant Ballard's discovery of the Titanic. Even more interesting is that the expedition and resulting images of the ghostly ocean liner being beamed back on U.S. Navy, news channels was actually a cover-up for a covert mission for the real purpose, and that was to find two former Soviet nuclear submarines, two U.S. submarines, the wreckage of USS Thresher and USS Scorpion that sank in the Atlantic in the 1960s. And Ballard's underwater ROV technology was breakthrough stuff at the time. We talk a lot about UUVs today, and we sort of get a little bit giddy about it. But here's 1960s, and Alvin was able to operate autonomously or remotely without being manned, and also was able to deep dive with personnel on board. Well, you know, at this point, we've all seen it, right? You know, we can sort of hear Celine Dion in the background. You know, my heart will go on, or what is it? My heart will go on, and you know, I'm king of the world. And but I think that was a great cameo. That was another tribute. You know, a lot of folks missed the story. This was really all about ONR research, and Alvin deep submersibles. So anyway, it's a sort of shameless parochialism trying to tie ONR research into undersea as a submariner. Just wanted to get that out of the way right at the get-go. ONR past, that's all you get. Let's talk about ONR present. Looking up at the clock, I still have so much time. I'm going to have to tell you a few more. How about that Boston Red Sox thing? So here's the Boston Red Sox story, right? You know, we're in the full swing of the season right now. They're duking it out with the Baltimore Orioles. And, you know, one of the things that's cool about baseball is the role of the leadoff hitter. And, you know, the leadoff hitter, the only thing I have to do as the first speaker is to not strike out and to get on base. And it can even just be a single. If I accomplish that, then that's a huge, huge victory as a leadoff hitter. The pressure is on Mr. Stackley because he's got to avoid that double play, and he's got to get me around, at least to third base. So anyway, Red Sox analogy. Let's talk about ONR present. I mentioned very briefly in my opening about the railgun, another major, well-known ONR project. There's an interesting backstory to this project as well. The EMRG is a revolutionary long-range naval gun that fires precision-guided, high-velocity projectiles to ranges greater than 100 nautical miles. Rather than gunpowder, rocket motors, the railgun uses electric power to propel the projectiles. When the Navy first looked at the railgun, the experts on that technology at the time were in Scotland, where Donald Trump happens to be today inspecting his golf courses. So the fleet commander at the time, Admiral Natter, and the chief of Naval Research, Admiral J. Cohen, thought it was a great time to go to Scotland. I'm not sure if golf was involved, but they went to observe the railgun at work in its sort of infant stages, observing a couple of test shots of these projectiles being flung into the North Sea. Both were so impressed that they arranged to get the whole system back to the U.S. to start the U.S. Navy's development of the railgun. And you can see that original gun and its capacitor bank down at Dahlgren today, along with the improved prototypes that evolved from that original design, thanks to the hard work of ONR back then and through today. In many cases, there are many people here today that can speak at length to the historical credentials of ONR, so I won't dwell on your incredible history of achievement. However, I would like to take this opportunity to share a couple of recent successes that directly impact fleet readiness. And so I know that there's some laser geeks out there, and there's some other guys that are bending the space-time continuum and trying to figure out ways that we can, sneak around the adversary with cloaking devices and whatnot. But I want to talk to you about some nitty-gritty, practical ONR accomplishments that have changed the face of our current fleet. In 2012, scientists in the chemistry division at the Naval Research Laboratory developed a novel two-component siloxane-based non-skid coating for use on flight decks and walkways of U.S. Navy ships. This research was funded by ONR's Future Naval Capability Program. Dr. Aaron Perez was the lead behind that FNC, and it was supported by Naval Sea Systems Command. The new coating, more durable, color retentive, chemical resistant, and cheaper due to a longer life expectancy than traditional epoxy-based coatings. The Navy installs, get this number, 3.7 million square feet of coating, non-skid coating per year at an annual cost of over $56 million, with a maximum life expectancy of the legacy non-skid coating of just 18 months. An improvement in durability has significant impact on costs. So again, sometimes it's the boring stuff. It's the non-skid. How can we do that better? How can we save money? How can we reduce disruption to ship schedules? How do we maximize ASABO? ONR at the forefront of trying to find ways to cheat the system, buy the Navy more time with a smaller fleet. Similarly, in 2013, scientists in NRL's chemistry division developed a rapid cure single-coat tank coating. This technology, which has been implemented fleet-wide, has provided a $7 million annual cost savings to date and is making a significant contribution toward reducing the total ownership costs associated with corrosion control of U.S. Navy ships and submarines. The new coatings have resulted in cost savings of nearly 35% in tank and void painting costs, a 40% reduction in tank void preservation time, with a material cost equal to the legacy systems. So again, it sounds like a little thing, but it's a big thing. It's a gift that keeps on giving. This really, truly does impact fleet readiness in a very favorable way. ONR past, Alvin, SOSUS. ONR present, railgun, great, awesome, corrosion control, painting schemes. Now let's talk about the future. And this is really where I want to spend the most of my time this morning with you, and that's to talk about where are we headed, and are we on the right path, and are we aligned to go ahead and make and maximize and optimize naval power, for the next 70 years. So, it's important to, get our references out. As Admiral Richardson became the CNO, one of his first acts was he promulgated this design for maintaining maritime superiority. It's a Navy design that recognizes the current challenges, sort of a little bit of this shift in pivot point or inflection point in time. That we as a Navy are sort of looking to a different future. And if we don't adjust to it, woe to us. The other great power competitors are beginning to adjust and leverage and be ready for this new future. If we're too much stuck in the past or tied up in just the churn of the present, and we're not looking hard enough at what we're going to need as a Navy in the future, it's going to be a tough time for the United States. So what pivot am I talking about? What is this inflection point that I want to really impress upon you today? And what it is for me is we're sort of back to the future with regard to major competition at sea, or combat at sea is coming back. We've had a very unusual occurrence in the past 15 to 20 years. That's sort of more the exception than the rule. If you look at the grand scope of time, way back before our country was founded, and then even in our country's history, naval power is really about a command of the seas, a control of the seas, providing stability for maritime commerce, providing protection for ourselves and our allies. It's a sea versus sea contest against us and pretty strident adversaries that are trying to wrest that advantage from us. Well, the last 15 to 20 years, we haven't had a great competitor on the seas. And so very unusual. And as a result, we shifted our strategy from basically sea control to this idea of power projection forward from the seas, this forward presence, being able to influence things on land from the sanctuary that is the sea. And you and us have done pretty well at that sport. We've really made a pretty big difference with regard to shaping important things that are vital to our nation's interests. But we've been flexing different muscles, and it's tough sport to be able to do power projection from carriers, from sanctuary where they're not challenged by an adversary, but it's a much more different thing when now we are in a intense sea denial domain where we're still trying to maintain influence. So as you look at these great competitors in China and Russia, resurgent Russia and China coming up, they are bent on, again, contesting our superiority in the seas. And since the last time that occurred, and again, all in our lifetime, we remember this. We remember World War II. We remember the Cold War. We remember Tom Clancy and Red Storm Rising. We knew what the World War III Battle of the Atlantic was going to look like with regard to the Soviet Union's Navy and the U.S.'s Navy. But with the dissolution of the former Soviet Union and sort of the collapse of their economy and therefore their fleet, we've had this sort of nice privilege of no challenge. So sea denial is back, and it's back in a more ferocious way. Before it used to just be the influence. We'd like to go sort of far from land and meet out in deep blue water and then duke it out. And it was really what they could bring with their sea forces and what we could bring in our sea forces. It was about bubbles of influence. How fast can I sense them? How far over the horizon can I sense them? And then it was about reach. It was about range of missiles. So not only the ability to sense and respond, but the ability then to attack and press the fight and have superiority. Well, that's still true. As China develops its naval forces, they're ready for that sea control fight. What's different this time is the range at which the overprotection from land occurs. And these very long-range missiles, this ability to stare much, much further out to sea. We used to talk about this littoral environment, this highly contested environment close to shore. And again, the Navy team, Navy Marine Corps, figured out ways to go ahead and dance within that tough region. To try to eke out an edge to be able to have some advantage in an area where it's highly contested. Well, the boundary of where that littoral environment goes is blurred quite a bit, to hundreds of miles, well out into the deep reaches of blue water. So the question is, how are we as a Navy going to fight a force that has an advantage? And this is not unusual. This is not new. We've done this before. Bob Work talks about offsets: first offset, second offset, now the third offset. Is we are at a disadvantage with regard to traditional warfare, especially with the sea denial or anti-access area denial construct. How are we going to go ahead and reform and operate in a different way to gain advantage? When I was up at MIT Lincoln Labs in Lexington maybe 2 months ago, and we were brainstorming about a new fleet design to follow the Navy's design outlined by Admiral Richardson. How do we fight and win with what we have and what we're procuring in a different way to give us more power and more advantage than the adversary in a sea-denied environment? Lincoln Labs, and this is another phenomenon that has happened in our nation's history of recent years, and that is this intolerance for casualties. I mean, it's really incredible how low that we've pushed that down. It's a lot harder to do in a sea fight. It's very, very difficult to minimize the amount of personnel loss. We know how savage ship sinkings and loss of life was in World War II as we fought against Imperial Japan in the Pacific. But Lincoln Labs they were approaching this sort of like they did with land war in the desert. They were saying, hey, we see this keep-out zone, this sort of red line, and we're trying to figure out ways that you can stay outside the danger zone and still have an influence, be able to penetrate in, grow longer arms, or have these fleeting raids where you're able to put the shields down, go in, do your bidding, get out. And so that's sort of where we're focused with our technology. That's how we're going to help the Navy solve this problem in a sea-contested anti-access area denial environment. Well, I'm here to tell you, if you follow that logic to its natural conclusion, it leads to a bad place, because those ranges of the weapons from bad guy country continue to grow further and further out, shouldering U.S. forces further and further out. So one of the premises of the Navy's fleet design is that we're going in. We're going to figure out a way to fight within the red zone to maximize not just our own survivability, but the amount of inconvenience we cause on red. We want to go ahead and make red's challenge much more harder, given some of the advantages that he has as the home team in this regional fight. And so how are we going to do that? Well, the fleet design has 3 critical elements I want to talk about today, and there's a couple things that you're already working on to contribute to this future. And those elements are integration, distribution, and maneuver. So the idea is simply this, is one of the asymmetric advantages we have is clearly the asymmetric advantage of undersea superiority. The second one that's also very important is how well we as a Navy fighting force integrate our forces. We see this in the carrier strike groups, with our ARGMU forces, how we're able to bring parts together in a much more potent way than the sum of the parts alone. And so this ability to integrate for better battle space awareness, for a greater balance and shifting of power, kinetic power, non-kinetic power within the organism that is this integrated sea team is going to be vital for the future. Distribution, there's been a lot of talk recently about distributed lethality, distributed logistics, is in our exercises and in our operations, we see a great advantage of being able to distribute that force and create more challenge for red. More threat access, this integrated distributed force presents a much more complicated calculus problem for red. And then lastly is this idea of maneuver. And maneuver warfare is not anything new. It's big on land, but it's also vitally important in the seas. And the mobility that we have and the freedom of motion that we have in the seas, we have to be able to capitalize on maneuver in the blue water fight. Equally important is maneuver in the spectrums that we fight in the electromagnetic spectrum as we go forward. So the design calls for 2 critical fleet-wide capabilities, a fleet tactical grid and a fleet warfighting training system. And by grid, I don't necessarily just mean net. I'm not talking about the cloud or the ability for us to all talk to each other. It has to be at least that. But by the fleet tactical grid, we're talking about a thinking, adapting, self-aware, integrated system of systems, where the net is aware of the nodes and what power and abilities within the nodes. and figures out how to optimize those with regard to the stimulus of the challenge at hand. To be able to be very agile with how we distribute power within the fleet tactical grid. So ONR is already working on projects that will begin to frame this fleet tactical grid. One of them is the Transportable Electronic Warfare Module, or TUM. It contributes to the blue line of effort in incredible ways with this nettedness, this stitching together of a composite force. TUM is an advanced EW capability for use on manned or unmanned platforms with a primary thrust in the areas of anti-ship missile defense and counter-surveillance. Second program, Nemesis, another push towards expanding our electromagnetic maneuver warfare capability. A systems-to-systems Nemesis provides the ability to synchronize electronic warfare effects across a variety of distributed platforms to create a coherent and consistent EW effect. This is it. This is the secret sauce of the future. It's this synchronization within the spectrum of electromagnetic maneuver warfare that's going to be vital for the future. Well, you know, it's just not about the stitching, but it's also about the nodes, right? And ONR is working hard on developing new nodes, not just the traditional ones, the platforms, the current payloads, the current sensors that we have, but new nodes to fit into this fleet tactical grid, and especially with regard to the unmanned nodes. So in Sea Hunter, the design calls for exploring alternative fleet designs, including manned and unmanned systems. Sea Hunter, the naval equivalent of Google's self-driving car, meets this requirement. And it is going to change some of the calculus with regard to how we operate man-machine, manned platforms, unmanned platforms, how we accentuate the values that each brings, the unique value proposition or contribution that the manned and unmanned can do together in the system-of-systems fight. Another example of ONR contributing to our development of alternative fleet designs is the low-cost UAV swarming technology, or LOCUST, which is on display out in the courtyard today. LOCUST will launch 30-plus swarming UAVs to autonomously overwhelm an adversary. This week, the LOCUST Leap Ahead effort successfully conducted the final land experiment at Yuma Proving Ground, where 31 Coyote UAVs were launched in approximately 40 seconds, conducted a series of swarm formation maneuvers, and the next step is preparations for at-sea trials, possibly late July. Another unmanned capability, last one in the feature section here, is Swarm, a technological breakthrough that will allow any USV to not only protect Navy ships, but also autonomously swarm offensively against hostile vessels. If an adversary were to fire on USVs, obviously no human life would be at risk. These are the kind of breakthroughs that result in the Navy's long-term support, or the result of the Navy's long-term support of innovation, research, and science and technology. Second thing, and I say I'm out of time, is the fleet warfighting training system. This is going to be important as we rely more on non-kinetic effects, as we rely more on man-machine teaming, how we're going to train as a fleet to fully leverage the power of these tools that you're going to bring us. We have to really look at different ways we're going to train. Live virtual constructive training, ONR is at the center of. It puts real-world platforms and operators, the live part interacting with network simulators, the virtual part, against synthetic forces, the constructive part. And anything that we can do to go ahead and develop the right tools for today's generation of very skilled social media gaming type of folks to be able to see and employ the system of systems better is going to be vitally important. So, in closing, I appreciate the opportunity to share this celebration with you today and want to thank you again for all of your time and effort. And again, just to reemphasize the intro point, and that is what you do matters. Appreciate your patriotic duty and the way that you make our country great. So thanks so much for supporting our fleet, and look forward to seeing you out in the courtyard.